The sexual harassment scandal involving people in all walks of life and the different ways in which they are both handling it and facing consequences for it. It's raising a whole host of legal issues, including something as simple as what in fact is a fireable offense. Does it matter whether the victim is a coworker or a subordinate? Does the law have to redefine itself to keep up with how this whole unseemly thing is evolving? Well, politicians of both major parties, as you probably know by now, involved. Senator Al Franken, Democrat from Minnesota, apologized that after allegations and this picture surfaced, he's now facing an ethics investigation. Roy Moore, that we talked at length and too much for my taste, Republican that we discussed, is of course vehemently denying all of the case or charges against him. And it goes on beyond that. Charlie Rose, Mark Halperin, accused of harassing people who work for them, but with New York Times reporter Glenn Thrush, it was co-workers. Guys in the left-hand screen have fired, the other one right now suspended. So what about the situation where it's not even someone that you work with, like, let's say, a construction worker, catcalling, or even grabbing a woman who happens to walk by? Well, I bring our legal panel to try and get to this, and really this is an unfolding story. Jim Kasouris, criminal defense attorney in Manhattan. He sits on the board of directors of the New York City Criminal Bar Association. He also frequently lectures at New York Law School and the bar associations in Queens and New York City. Doug Von Oist, founding partner of Carson Von Oist, focusing on corporate misconduct and also selected by the Legal 500 as one of the most influential trial lawyers in the country. Mayo Bartlett, an attorney at the law offices of Mayo Bartlett PLLC and a former chief of the bias crimes unit at the Westchester County District Attorney's Office, and Mimi Roca, the distinguished fellow in criminal justice at Pace University Law School, and until recently an assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York, a position she held for more than 15 years. So there's so many different ways to approach this, but Mimi, there is no line, is there? There is no, yes, there's criminal in terms of clearly what is not allowed and what is, but in terms of in the workplace and whether a person's a subordinate or a person is a coworker, or if this happened even though you're a representative of said company and you did it to somebody else at a bar where you act untoward to them. Is this on a case-by-case basis? Is there guidance to how corporations should or shouldn't handle this? Obviously, this is driven by stock price, bad press, and everything else, but are people making this up as they go along?
I think a little bit, in the sense that we've never had it sort of play out so much in the public realm. So, and that's part of what's happening right now is it's case by case, but every one of those cases is being debated very publicly. And, you know, it's not a criminal court, it's not even a civil court, so we don't have a standard, we don't have cross-examinations, and yet you have very thorough reporting going on, you have people coming forward, you know, on live television and, you know, putting themselves out there in a way that makes them quite credible, because really, who wants to be that person, even in this atmosphere, coming out and being the face of this right now? It's still a hard position to be in. And so I think that people who are willing to come out and do that publicly, they should have some presumption almost of belief, because it's hard to believe that—
Which is the inverse of everything that you usually hear, which is innocent until proven guilty. And now Mayo, in a perverse sense, you have cases where it doesn't involve minors, it doesn't involve sexual assault in the most common use of the definition, but nonetheless, there's harassment involved, alleged, and the people who acknowledge the behavior, they're terminated almost summarily. Those who deny it, even more serious charges. I mentioned Roy Moore, but even the President of the United States, you know, we hear statute of limitations, you hear whatever else, and in some cases, they move on. My point is, it's a horrible message to be sending, but you're an attorney now, and a client comes in this culture, in this climate that we're in. Do you say admit nothing?
Well, I always tell my clients, number one, maintain your innocence and don't say anything. You just maintain your silence. But I do have an issue with assuming that because someone comes forward with a complaint that we should believe them. Some people say believe the women, believe anybody who complains. You don't say if someone gets shot by the police. You got to believe the people who the police shot. No one says that, and nor should they. You have to really give the presumption of innocence to the accuser, certainly in the criminal arena.
Okay, but I'll give
to
you
the accused,
but I'll give you the real life scenarios that are happening. More often than not, whether it's Senator Franken, whether it was Charlie Rose, there seem to be some detailed allegations against him, but more broadly, somebody will do a modified hangout where they'll answer, I don't remember it exactly the same way, but in retrospect, I wish I acted differently, and clearly I made said person uncomfortable. I apologize for my actions. That's enough now to get you terminated. And let me be clear, I have no sympathy for these guys who are getting pink slipped. But are we going to have a turn here, which is admit nothing? Unless they got video proof you're a photograph, it's your word against theirs.
That's a personal choice, and most people don't admit anything anyway. But when you really stop to look at it, you ought to thoroughly investigate it. Now, just because I say you don't automatically believe the accuser, it doesn't mean you disregard what they have to say. You investigate it, you give a full and thorough investigation. It's about the dynamic of power, basically, because if any of our clients are on the receiving end of these accusations, it doesn't take us 2 or 3 years for the charges to be filed. Lots of times they lose their job immediately and they get arrested. It's only when you're the president or you're someone of power, and we talked about it earlier, that you have this different dynamic that allows you to maneuver through these areas
I don't think
so
they
easily.
do. I think by and large here, the rapidity and the pace where things are happening. And I'm not saying it's bad. Hopefully this will have a national conversation which will lead to change, because clearly this thing has been endemic. And Jimmy, this is close to you because we know your better half here has been involved a large part of her adult life in working with women who've been the victims of abuse here. But you know, you see, I mean, people every day, it's like, who got caught next?
This is a conundrum that those who are accused are in. Why are they admitting it? I mean, all of us have to have been asking ourselves, something happened 20 years ago, 25 years ago. The problem is this: you can deny all you want, but in order for that to stick, it appears that everybody around you has to also lie for you. Look at the conundrum that they're in. They're admitting it because it's so pervasive, so pervasive in the industry. How many actors have come out and said, we knew Harvey Weinstein was a pig, but you know something, we didn't say anything, and we feel bad about saying something. How many people have come out and made it so clear that so many of these people who have been accused, it was just this dirty little secret that because of their power, because of their influence over other people, and not for nothing, because of the money they were making, either for themselves or their networks or stars or movie companies, this was a secret that was kept.
And
now that the accusations come
out,
out, they know everybody's got a lie for them, and they're not going to.
And you know what's interesting to me is how the standard is a moving target. I think some of this is generational. It's amazing some of the conversations I have with people who I respect. And they're from an older generation. They'll say, oh, they waited 25, 30 years. I mean, what are we doing here? And I'm like, are you kidding me? Let's put this context in. I go, what if that was your granddaughter? Or what was, I mean, are we really that myopic? And then you talk to younger people and they all seem to get it. But Doug, let's just stay in the entertainment world for a second. Kevin Spacey, Louis C.K., barring a surprise, their careers are toast, okay? But yet, you have two rappers who, Chris Brown, or whatever you want to call musical artists, and R. Kelly, who have had a legion of charges that have involved abuse, harassment, and dealing with underage people, and they just put out a hit single, and the same standard's not applied to them. It seems to me that when you leave the criminal arena, and you're now leading into a corporate or civil arena, that, like I said, you're making this somebody's going along. And sometimes with the same parent companies in entertainment that will treat certain people differently than others.
It's kind of sad, isn't it? I mean, the problem that you have here is that you're taking every one of these allegations and you're evaluating them all together. They are different. Factually, they're different, and the standards are different. You can have a civil violation, a criminal violation, or you could have both. You're looking at the entire problem as one problem without looking at the individual cases. When you're naming, you just named 4 different separate cases, and we're trying to say, well, why are these cases being treated differently than these? I don't know. they have to play out. There has to be some form other than the tabloid headlines in talking about it around the water cooler. Somebody has to look at these acts. Are they criminal? Are they civil? Should they be treated the same way? Should they be treated differently?
But it's about money. It's
it
about
is.
money.
But
If a
do
guy's
that
going to
in
put a
the-
hit single out and you're going to make
Somebody
money,
goes and says, give me some counsel here. What do I do with an employee who, to a subordinate or a coworker, acted improperly? And it's a broad generalization, okay? Pretty soon there's going to be a countersuit by one of these people who are terminated to say I was wrongly accused or whatever else. But what are you going to do? You're going to have the person anchor your nightly news here with that specter hanging over him? Of course you're not. I wouldn't, right? So my question is, how do we live in this limbo until the law is more clearly defined? Does labor law need to change? What has to happen so that it's not as many shades of gray?
Well, I think, as Doug said, it does depend which situation we're talking about. If we're talking about an employer, looking out for in their company, I mean, there is Title VII. There's a process, and the employer is supposed to have a process in place where it can be investigated and adjudicated, in a sense, within the employment realm, before it gets to an actual lawsuit, as opposed to, I mean, some of this conduct, though. This is what's, I think, most astonishing about what's going on. There's not a lot of conduct that we're hearing about that's close to the line. We're hearing about conduct that's pretty extreme, hands-on, much of which could be criminal assault cases. And I know the whole if true.
Yeah.
But the point I was saying earlier is not, that we should just accept everything that everybody says who comes forward, but just that it is such a traumatic, horrible experience to be the person coming forward and say this, even in today's climate, that I think, you have to ask, well, why would they be doing this if it wasn't true? Yes, there could be political motives, although even if there's political motives, doesn't mean it's not true and didn't happen. Could be both. But, it's just, that's the presumption I was talking about.
And just to, if you want to even further muddy this, think about the one place where seemingly to this point people were protected. That's the U.S. Congress. Literally $17 million of your money, my money, taxpayer dollars has basically been hush money to settle at least a couple of suits against sitting lawmakers, let alone other staff and attached below. Now, this won't last much longer. I think Congress, unless they're suicidal, are going to change the laws here and change the reporting structures and not mandate, for example, that the accuser has to go in for counseling like is currently stipulated. So that'll change here. But I've never seen something with this rate of pace, and it's overdue, to finally get up to the table. But I do think people are trying to figure this out as they go along. All right, coming up next. They don't really compete. But if they merged, they wouldn't corner the market. So the question is, why is the government trying to block the merger of AT&T and Time Warner? Does the president's ongoing feud with CNN possibly have anything to do with it? We'll discuss.